Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing guest coming to us from the Great White North from Canada. We have Jeff Selver on board today. With an MBA and passion for management and leadership, Jeff worked in banks corporate training as a motivational speaker and teaching mindful leadership. He has been under the tutelage of a Vedic teacher for over 20 years, where he learned Vedic philosophy and meditation. When his memories of an alien contact came out, Jeff began presenting on his contact events in UFO groups, sharing his story in detail and providing research and corroboration with other experiencers. He currently resides in Vancouver, BC with his spouse. In December of 1997, Jeff experienced the Rising, which was an agreement with great aliens to discover his soul. The Rising required him to take a leap of faith, sell all of his possessions, and began a life traveling from place to place. What unfolds is truly epic. An adventure of removal from society and living close to nature, all while having contact events with great aliens without his knowing. In summary, it is 26 contact events with great aliens, told in amazing detail and spread out from the years 1993 to 2017. Fundamentally, Jeff was shown that what humans understand about spirituality, life after death, dimensions, God, the soul, and psychic powers are just the beginning of what these beings are all about, and that their capacity, understanding, and utilization of these is much greater than humans can imagine. Jeff's story shows that the only way we will ever be able to understand the Greys is to understand the power of our own personal spiritual potential. Jeff is also the author of the books, The Rising, and the Alien Plan to Build an Enlightened City on Earth, and the Rising Workbook, How to Create Your Own Rising. So Jeff, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, Mr. Gray, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you.
Now, your story is a big one. Hopefully we'll be able to get into as much as possible, but if there's a chance for part two, we could always do that too.
You got it. You got it.
Now, I believe that growing up, you didn't know you were a contactee up until the age of 40-ish.
That's right. 41. Yeah, that's correct. It's a long time to go not knowing you're a contactee. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into that. What happened?
Yeah. The story, so because I had that consciousnly event happen when I was in my 20s, happened in the year 1997, it left, basically it was, I've always kind of called it a consciousness event because it was a culmination of sure, kind of God awareness, but there were changes. The point is that I wasn't looking for these kind of things to happen. I wasn't a meditator. I was reading spiritual books earlier in the year, in the summer, but I wasn't driving to create this type of experience that would end up happening. And it kind of came upon me, and it had a lot of mystery behind it. But it was compared with a message to leave my life, to go traveling. And it also had, one of the distinguishing marks of it was an alteration to my body. There was kind of an always reported and wrote about it in a journal at the time that the cells of my body felt like they had golden light in them. And only now, all these years later, it appears to have been a Kundalini rising, but mixed with some other kind of mysterious elements. And the message to leave my life was also kind of a really odd part to the story. And when I first I resisted, and then I finally succumbed to it. And when I did, I began seeing things in the sky, like throughout the entire time I was backpacking. So I kept having run-ins, if you will, with objects of light in the sky. And I didn't know that could be alien contact. Especially because it's so personal and so intimate, you can't imagine that that's what alien contact is like. Then there were a series of synchronicities and kind of magical events that had me leave traveling. So it had a really weird impression in me, the kind of like, what was that all about? But because I'd met a guru, and I was a spiritual person at the time, I kind of left it up with like, well, I guess that was meant to be. It was this kind of magical set of events, and that's how I left it. And it was about 2016 that it all started to really I really started to re-question what had happened. Why did it go that way? Now that I'm kind of more grown up and how I'm more experienced and more wise, hey, that didn't make any sense. So what really happened there? And kind of asking questions had me started going down rabbit holes. I did not think aliens and UFOs. I couldn't even begin to imagine that this had anything to do with aliens and UFOs. But when I started to investigate the one documentary that really hooked me was Jeremy Corbell's Bob Lazar documentary, and it was so well done and kind of grounded that I kind of decided, hey, this is really interesting, and it had me questioning a lot of stuff I had read as a kid. As a kid, I was into kind of the mysterious of the unknown and UFOs and such, and I eventually, in 2019, I started. I got myself into a UFO YouTube channel. So it's called Finding UFO, and it's just uploaded videos of people's filmed objects. So not too much commentary, and he's just showing the videos. And that had an effect on me. And what happened was the objects I had been seeing in the sky came back while traveling. Sorry. So basically, like a weird gap happened where I'm seeing these objects as a youth when I'm having this mysterious event. Now I'm going down the rabbit hole of UFOs at the age of 40. So 2016 was when I started going down the rabbit hole. 2019 was the year I put it together, the year that I started going down the rabbit hole of aliens and UFOs. So it's a huge gap. And they came back basically when I started looking at those videos online, and started acting and behaving exactly the same way I had experienced them when I was traveling. And that, I mean, that's it. Eventually you're like, why? What the hell is going on? And the big question, the why, like why would this happen? Why would that be connected? And there's the book, there's a whole chapter dedicated to it. I think it's called The Awakening. And it's safe to say eventually there was maybe some kind of communication from these objects in the sky. And I was reminded of some weird things as a teenager that I'd basically just forgotten. And I kind of had a screen memory I didn't really understand to be a screen memory at the time. And something was off about this memory. And I kind of realized I didn't remember there being basically as an owl outside my teenage home when I was growing up. And I'd had this memory for a long time, but I didn't actually imagine it had anything. Once I realized something was telling me to look at that memory, I kind of understood that. I realized I never seen an owl there. And once I realized something weird like that was going on in my head, I had to go out, and I went out to the location where it had occurred, or where this memory was. And I could feel I'd been lured out there. And there was a really distinct, there's a distinct feeling in your head that you have an idea of how life went in one way, and then something else happened that you aren't aware of. And I could feel I'd been lured out. Something had, like, kind of telepathically or something had kind of lured me out. And then I had an interaction out there, and I would learn it's my second contact event. And once I touched it, once I had the impression or the feeling inside myself of what it felt like to interact with these things, the flashbacks started opening up. And that happened over months. And it went from a process of I just couldn't even believe it. Especially 41, you can't believe you have to rewrite your history, that somehow aliens were intertwined with it, especially because this consciousness event was so personal. I didn't quite understand it. And what unraveled was 26 contact events with gray aliens, and quite a bit while I was traveling without my knowing. And it is just insane. I'm stumbling upon more and more and more evidence that an idea like this is even possible. I just met someone who has a CIA contact, and they said that they're very aware of this, and they call it slotting, how aliens can stop time and then interact with an individual, and then they can erase the memory so the person doesn't know. So literally, like my own contact events, I'm walking home from school, I'm walking home from hanging out with friends, and there's a contact event, and the me just thinks I walked across the field and has no idea that there was a contact event, a full blown contact event. And though it left weird impressions, you can never conceive of what actually occurred. So then you never put it together. And that's appears to be in large part what was going on with me over those 26 contact events.
So now these contact events, are these like mostly conscious recall memories?
So now they are conscious recall memories. Yeah, like I mean, they slot themselves in as memories. That's an example I use of that is the sensations. Like there's a frontal lobe process going on in the memory. So the heat of so I'm in the 11th contact event. I'm in Nova Scotia, and the craft is down on the logging road, and the heat of the humidity is in the craft, and I can smell the air in the memory. And same when I see the dead cow on the 10th contact event, I can smell the cow. So there's a frontal lobe process going on. I'm aware human being in the memory, and then they obscured it, but once it's opened, it's a memory is what it is. Yeah. So I was conscious the entire time. That's the most shocking part of it all, is being having a whole duplicity, a whole other second life. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into your first one. I think it's at the age of 16. This
That's
is where, yeah,
correct.
the agreement comes in and the elder. So what
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah, you got it. So I don't know that there's a real easy way to summarize this contact event, but do my best, because everything launches from having childhood contact events. It's there's a fascinating science to them and a psychology, like a mastery on their behalf, that you know, if you're going to give something really extreme to a human being that is beyond their own world, then the best way to do it is to give them increments of it over their entire lifehood. And so by the time you're at a certain age, you can process it and have maturity about it. And so they were really doing that at the childhood stage, that they kind of warming up to them, telepathy, the idea that I have their genetics, the way it feels to be on the craft. All those were kind of in my childhood times. And then they show up in 16 and I'm walking across a field, literally, their presence opens up all the memories, and I'm confused because I'm a person, 16-year-old, who doesn't know he's having alien contact, but now all of a sudden has memories of it and doesn't understand it. And that helped when it came to the time of me going in the craft and actually communicating with this entity through telepathy. The childhood stuff actually is the one that made me say, okay, they aren't harmful, they never harmed me. In fact, they were uh, I mean, it's safe to say at that time I thought they were benevolent, and I still do think they're benevolent, but it hadn't got extreme with me at all at that point. And it really is just fascinating to be interacting with these entities. And they also were, they were explaining I have their genetics in them, and that answered some things in my private life, my personal life as a teenager at that time. So they convinced me to work with them. And they also saw my future, and there was a whole thing there. And not that I fully understood it at the time, but I agreed to work with them. And then upon agreeing to that, the agreement was, we'll help you discover your soul. It will propel you to leave your life, and then we will monitor you. And they kind of treated it like an experiment. What I didn't know at the time, and is that monitoring would include biology, taking biology from me. So I didn't quite know that at the time. And so it was kind of like an agreement, and I kind of agreed to it. And so the agreement was, they'll help me discover my soul. So that's the gist of it. And so in that 16-year-old contact event number one, um, basically they say, we're going to help you discover your soul. We'll do it today. And then we'll keep it from you, kind of your mind, like we'll kind of split up your mind, basically. And I didn't really understand it, but they seemed to be in control of everything. So I was intrigued, and I wanted to understand what this was about. So I agreed. And so they put me into a dimensional room. And in this dimensional room, I got turned into an orb. And um, bliss is the only I don't think there's nothing human yet that can match this. Bliss it's Kundalini rising, but there was something electromagnetic of the field, and I'm certain they've also tapped into the God field, and that this is kind of what all this is, and the craft itself is alive, and I was in unity, and then but there's several things that go on that are really, really important. They're also turned into orbs, and I realize we're all the same, and there's no difference between me and them. And it is a huge change, because I am no longer scared of them. Even though they're intimidating, they are intimidating. But when you kind of get the heart level, the soul level, you're like, oh yeah, that's fine. But they respect me, and because I'm a soul just like they are, and that really is the facts. And once that was there, there was no inhibitions either. And within the room, it was like just a pure exposure, a degree that humans do not know nor understand. And within that is security and love and compassion. It's like this high thing, and there's no holding on because you don't need to hold on because it's available all the time, and it's unity. It's just there's only words is all I have, and you have to translate that into a personalized experience somehow. So then within that, she shows me the afterlife. So they really went all the way down the rabbit hole here. And the reason they would do this is because they were showing me it's a long sequence that happens here. It's very powerful, but they were showing me that my higher self, the oversoul, if you will, this kind of larger version of you, of us, of ourselves, made the agreement with them. So they show me that after the death of my last, it's a whole sequence from the death of my last life to the birth of my life, the Jeff Selver life. And they have kind of planted sequences. And I've always said this, it seems like holograms, but of real life events because I had shared experience with it. And so I see the death of my last life go up to the afterlife, and then it becomes the higher self, or retain, or like kind of reforms back into the higher self. And then kind of immediately a gray alien is approaching my higher self, and they're showing me actually very emphatically as an orb in the afterlife, me, the 16-year-old watching, the gray alien who's showing me all this is like, watch this, and really wanted me to see that there was an interaction between a gray alien and my higher self kind of agreeing. And that is what happens is my higher self agrees to this whole thing with the gray aliens. And a sequence of events that basically is the development of me. And too much detail there to talk about, I think, here. But yeah, it's just all really wild. I was transformed when I came out of it. Was not the 16-year-old self, but I immediately had a psychosis, I think, where I was like, am I the 16-year-old self, or am I this eternal thing I just learned about? And I was really split. I actually really didn't know who I was anymore. And they were unfazed by it. They were like, hey, let's keep going. And then they kind of summarized the contact event up and sent me back down. And they basically, the elder, the main green alien is, you're right, I met here in this contact event, is the one who says, we'll see you again, but not for a while. And that was the beginning. And it was hidden so well, I could never even begin to imagine what had happened. I just, the way, the whole point of making it happen when I was walking home from friends is that my conscious mind could never imagine what it was or what had happened to me. So then when the rising occurs, the agreement to the experiment to discover my soul, when it occurs to the conscious me, I don't know. I think it's a spiritual event, and I have to listen to it. I could never begin to conceive where it originated from. And that appears to have been the plan. So that was the first one.
Now you talked about the elder. Now, did she ever give you her real name?
I don't believe she has a quote unquote human name. I had some synchronicities or corroboration about that. I met other contactees who have gray aliens that don't have names and appear to actually just use telepathic signatures. And without even having that knowledge, my 12th contact event, right? I'm panicking and I'm kind of mad, and I'm asking for the elder, and I call her the mother, and it's just a telepathic thing. And I'm asking this humanoid, where's the mother? Where's the mother? Where's the mother? That would how it would be translated to us, but it's technically I'm projecting an image of her, and the guy gets it. He's like, okay, I'll go, and he sends me to the elder. I ask a humanoid, what's your name? And he says, we don't have names like you have names. So the elder has never revealed a kind of name, a labeled name like we would have a labeled name. And I'm convinced that she doesn't have a labeled name like we have names. Yeah.
Well, some of the people that I've had on, the Greys do have names, but they're so hard to pronounce that the humans give them their own name, let's say.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, she's never led on nor hinted at. And even while referring to other entities, she's used telepathic signatures. Now you're right, maybe between themselves they have these kind of very, very, very complex, names or something that they don't tell humans. That could be the other part of it too. They're just not telling humans what these names are because there's no point. And that is something great aliens do. But yeah, you're right. But it was enough. The telepathic impressions were, in fact, always enough to communicate with and understand what each other meant. So, yeah, interesting.
So the next contact that starts off at the age of 17, there's a small gray that warns you about smoking. Was
Yeah,
that
yes,
uh,
yes.
that was
Yeah, good.
interesting, yeah.
Yeah, you got it. And yeah, I'm compelled. So I haven't seen them in a year and a half. So the distances between these contact events are staggering, actually, really. And they were giving me stuff and then waiting for me to grow up. And and so yeah, 17, I haven't seen them a year and a half. I'm compelled to go out of my house and go into the forest behind my house in the middle of the night. And 100%, it turns into a contact event. And I didn't, and it obviously what's happened is I was actually compelled by it was telepathically compelling me to come out. And I literally bushwhack into the middle of the forest, and there is a gray alien that turns me into the me that knows them. So I become aware of the last contact event. And what happens is I get the rush of the energy from seeing the afterlife and all that. It all kind of hits me in this really extreme way. And then when I come down, he's like, "We're coming soon," and it's the beginning, really. Like we're coming soon, and I'm like, "Right, we had an agreement. Hey, where is that going? I can't wait for this to happen. I'm really excited for it." And he's like, yeah, it's coming soon. We're in a timeline. And then, yeah, you're right. He's like, and I can't recall, but it's something along the lines of, like you smoke now. Like, yeah, he didn't like that I was smoking. And I was definitely saying to him, yeah, it's just a fad. Like I don't, I'm not committed to it. It's not something I take seriously. That ended up being a corroboration. I ended up finding out in David Jacobs' book, the threats that, he emphasized when you're part of the hybrid program, you're part of the programs with them, they get very sensitive to things like what is this tattoo or what is this piercing, and they really kind of don't like you messing with your body, and that is right in line here. Didn't like that I smoked, so I found that really interesting myself, and yeah, it's a funny thing to point out. Yeah.
Um, but didn't the elder eventually do like a detox on you? I found that really, really interesting.
What do you mean a
He removed the smoke from your lungs.
Oh, not me. You're talking about Jim Sparks.
Oh,
I think.
that was really in your book? Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I don't. I pulled the tar out of his lungs, right, and then they
Yes.
gave it back to him as a gift. Yeah, I think that's Jim Sparks. They
Oh,
never detoxed me, but the Rising, I think, would have been something along those lines. Yeah, the Rising itself, the consciousness experiment, which I do label in my book as having all these years later, knowing it was a big deal on their behalf and had a body change. There were body effects that were kind of purity effects, like I couldn't eat I couldn't eat processed food anymore. That kind of stuff what happened to me, and I became very sensitive to. Uh, yeah, I remember eating a chocolate bar, and my stomach went into aggravating pain, and I could feel all the sugars and everything in my body. It was really a heightened sensitivity that I've never been able to retain again, and it's now obvious it was they had done something to my body that made me this sensitive to it.
yeah, I've been vegan for 8 years now, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I'm a
So
vegetarian. Yeah.
yeah, at the age of 19, were you on the road? There's these two beings. Oh, these two beings. I call them hitchhikers, but they were on the road and they told you to stop.
Yeah, yeah, you got it. Yeah, they are kind of like hitchhikers, except they want me to go in their craft. Yeah, on the way back from my girlfriend's house, at the time, and I hadn't seen them again in a year and a half. The way they place these contact events, it's like 3 year differences. We're going to slot one contact event, number two, in the forest, right in the middle, and now we're at a year. So yeah, it's like 3 years from the time I saw the afterlife. Now it's actually all going to start up. And after that, I'll have like several contact events in over, spaced out over a couple months, but they're consistent. And this is the beginning of it. So 1996 October is when this happened. I was driving home late one night, and literally I become the me that knows them while driving. So I'm aware of the contact events, like they pop it open. And then immediately I'm seeing two gray aliens, tall gray aliens, on the side of the road. And then yeah, he's telepathically telling me to stop. And so I stop, I pull the car over. Fascinating interaction. I never see them communicate with each other before until this moment. So he walks over to me and he does a weird confirmation. He tells the other one, "This is the boy." And it's really weird because I'm a 19-year-old and I don't feel like a boy, but for them, I'm still a boy. I thought it was really interesting. And he's communicating with the other one. So there's a weird sensation of the way they talk with each other, like the telepathy in the air, if you will. And they pull me out and it's kind of like follow them. And we go into the forest off the road and I get zoomed into a craft. And with no knowledge, but I didn't see a craft, so it's just there was a craft there and I wasn't aware of it. And we'll go down some hallways and I basically go into a room of tubes. And the real like kind of energy of the afterlife and the white room and all that kind of dimensional stuff comes out when I see the elder. So when the elder approaches me, I have kind of the flashback of the afterlife stuff and spinning and being an orb and all that stuff. And I'm in, like, here's the thing: people have all these terrifying experiences of aliens, and I agree with all those because mine will get a bit hairy at sometimes too. But there was a period where I was in love with these entities, and I was young and I was, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. There's no other way to frame it. And yeah, I was in love with this experience, and also you're looking for meaning as a teenager. And this gave me meaning. They were the ones saying, "Hey, you're part of us, and you got these genetics, and we want to do this thing with you." And you're just agreeing, and you're like, "Okay, I'm in love with this," and I was in love. I couldn't have been more happier. And so I see the elder, and there's a personal interaction that goes on that's too detailed here. But then she wants to show me these tubes. And she says, "Okay, so I want to show you these things, basically." And she shows me these tubes, and in them are fetus versions of their kind. So they're small versions of them, and they're pretty disturbing to look at. And she explains some things that are very, very fascinating. Uh, this is how our kind is made, basically. So, and that they're genetic manipulators, and that the bodies in the tubes will eventually be used for specific genetic purposes in their society. So that they were very controlled about the way they made the bodies. And then she kind of interjects with, "We did this for you as well too, for humans, for your society." And it was a weird impression of tens of thousands of years ago, as if maybe they interjected in the development of the Homo sapien and changed some things. That's the kind of real ultimate impression. And she said, "We did it for your souls to be in." And like, it's a really weird thing to be told this, but it's another to be understanding that it's spiritual. And I think if you remove the spiritual side of aliens interjecting with the human genome, it really looks medical. It looks like mad scientist. But if you understand that the entities are aware of the spiritual element of it all, and that therefore they're aware that there's kind of a service thing going on, spirits want to be born into souls. Sorry, souls want to be born into bodies, and therefore, that's a service role. They're actually, and so they basically explain that we're the highest type of life engineers. So, and the word life engineer is so important here too, because it emphasizes like like we kind of now know we're in a simulation from quantum reality, and that there's a whole game going on with observation, with the mind, the eye, just observation alters protons with photons, and we alter our physical reality through observation, and relative, and space and time are relative to the observer, and that they might actually be something to do with all this kind of stuff, that limitation that's naturally born in the brain then. And that's how she describes it. We're the highest type of life engineers. We're aware of the perceptions. That's how she explains it. The perceptions of the consciousness as it's put into the body, and we're doing that as a service to the soul. And that's just huge. And I think I've heard some people call the Great Aliens Matrix creators, and I think that's kind of like what that could mean, where you're like, they might be the creators of the whole way the human being frames the reality, and that's done on purpose for the spiritual development. And I'm convinced on some level we agree to it. And they're just playing a part of the service of it. Anyway, that's how that's what gets explained here. They're kind of explaining who they are actually, for the first time on the third contact event. And then she preempts me with, okay, so our work is going to start now, and we're going to start working together, which is the development for me to discover my soul. And so she basically, that's really the gist of the contact event, kind of warming me up to what is about to happen. Yeah.
Oh, you've been through a lot. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's just the beginning, right?
yeah, I
Yeah,
know, I
of
know, I
course.
know.
Yeah.
There's one thing, if I do ever like meet a great face to face and I'm in the position where I can ask questions. One of them would be regarding the genetic manipulation of the Homo sapien is, did they do something to us just before or after the deluge? Like, because we're seeing a huge difference in age wise about how long humanity can live out their lives. Just look at the old pre-Diluvian kings. If you look
Hmm.
at the records, they tend to live these like for hundreds of years, and now humanity lives like, if we're lucky, up to 100. So I'm wondering if they did something to us like genetically to alter our DNA so we could die earlier and thus be like, for at least for some like genetic manipulators out there, be more controllable. So
Yeah.
that's yeah. So that's like a thing I'm wondering sometimes.
Yeah, and I actually think we're going to find they built a kind of an infrastructure, and then the rest is nature and consciousness and the individual. And I think there might even be something to be said here about the electrical field of the planet interacting with that matrix. So like I think that we were coming out of a density, right? Like we have a lot of trouble understanding how the ancient man existed with so much war, battle, killing each other and all these kind of things that the ancient man did. And in the end, it could have been a natural byproduct of maybe an electrical field of the planet and the consciousness and the human and the DNA all kind of playing out in a natural way. And then within that, consciousness spirits are still being born, so they can create free will, or that there's a perception of free will that you're developing and kind of growing as a spirit. And that's the kind of like overarching joy. I always I'll always probably do that until we have the full answers to things, that there's a lot more nature and individual free will and consciousness. I don't, yeah, I think that the picture is just complex. That's actually probably my way to I frame it. I think it's so complex we have trouble understanding the larger aspects that manipulate or change or affect our history as humans. Yeah.
So your contact events, at least a lot of them, do happen when you're out there camping, doing stuff in the woods.
Yeah.
At the age of 19, you went out for a walk
Yeah.
on
Another
an
one.
empty road, and
Yeah.
there you go. So what
Yeah,
happened?
you got it. So um I think I saw a Reddit post. Do aliens like that we smoke pot? And I was like, oh, I should probably tell them about this, and I didn't. But I was smoking too much pot. And so I had and I wasn't a hugely pot smoking teenager at the time. But my I broke up with a girlfriend, so you kind of like lose the boundaries, and then you kind of let loose, and you're exploring yourself, and you have this new world where you're not bound by these rules of a girlfriend. And so I was in a band, and so we went camping at the Long Beach here in BC, and it was probably the most amount of pot I'd been smoking the entire time since I had been with no girlfriend. And I guess the aliens didn't like it because we had this agreement to discover my soul. So it kind of, the possibility that it could mess with things was there. And I think that really concerned them. And what's really weird too is that I might have smoked weed, but that didn't inhibit the memories. And there's something to be said here about what state the brain is in and who's really collecting these memories. If they're freezing time and then they're interacting with a human, and what part of my brain is actually the one, I don't know. It's just the whole thing is really strange to me. But I think that there's something to be said here about who's the consciousness and what part of that consciousness is operating when you're on craft. And because I have pretty clear memories of the event. And the reality is that I went for a walk, yeah, and then I got taken up, literally just walking, and then they basically show up above me and they just take me. And then immediately there's the feeling of like kind of scolding. The elder is right there, and I'm kind of gathering myself as I'm putting together what's going on. And she basically sends an image of an ape, like you're acting like an ape, basically, kind of unevolved, like you're acting like unevolved, like what we gave you is valuable, and you have the potential to harm it, and so you're kind of left with like, oh, so the guilt immediately that I was possibly damaging something that they gave me, and it's intimidating. These aliens are intimidating. There's never going to be a way to say that any differently, and they're intimidating, and now you've pissed them off a little bit, and so and it's for good reason. You're like, oh my God, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Oh no. And then she kind of says, okay, now go turn around, go place yourself on that chair. And I kind of turn around and I realize I'm in a room. There's other entities here. And there is a chair and she wants me to sit in the chair. And there was a tall medical alien. I sit in the chair and they put a device on my head. And right next to me, my brain pops up and it's kind of hologram of my brain. And I'm 100% convinced it's live. So that, because you can see it moving. And there was like information and stuff on the bottom, like language and script I couldn't read. And it was obvious they were just confirming damage hadn't been done. And she had done something, she was doing something to my body, like convulsing me or something. I can't even really fully understand it. But it was having like effects on the inside and it was making me cough. And and then she said, we don't want you to do this. But we know you're still going to do it. So use caution. And listen, like, I think a lot of humans have trouble with this type of stuff. I had total free will. I made an agreement with them. They never twisted or distorted or deceived or right. Like there was always a sense of my free will in the whole game. And here it is too. They're not, we need you to stop doing this and control my mind. They said, there's an element here we can't stop you, and we need you on your own to learn to stop doing this, but we can't tell you to stop doing it. So it's a really interesting thing, and that behavior is consistent through my entire life with the aliens, even to the present. So very interesting. So yeah, no control, just I feel bad like I would with my mom, my own personal mom. And then she says, okay, and she wants to put me on another device, and I go over to another device, and basically I lean back and I can see up, and it's a device strapping a bar on the back of my head, and what pops out is a hologram, and it's called she calls it the ocean of the mind, and it's the idea that the mind can be layered into segments. And I go into it in the workbook because I find it a fascinating meditation, and presently, but just an idea that every thought we have is based off of previous information from a previous experience that imprints itself in the layers of our mind, if you will, in the ocean of our own mind, every single one of us, and that everything comes back to a root formative thought. And she's showing me all those with my desire to smoke pot. And she's showing me that I actually have some childhood trauma of lack of love from my mom, and that this kind of creates a thought that was active. That was the whole thing. The thought was living in the present moment as a teenager, just sitting in the subconscious and the underneath, and then it created a mid thought, which made my desire to rebel, my desire to be into the music I was into. I was kind of into punk rock music and Dead Kennedys and No Means No and all that stuff. And so it had a root from this kind of like trauma from my mom. And then that root created the top thoughts. And so she showed me there was this kind of effect going on from lower thought, mid thought to the high thought, all but with this ocean of the mind hologram. And then she basically says something along the lines of, like, you have to, like, this is where it comes from, and you have to. She doesn't say anything, but she doesn't say you have to, but like she's pointing it out. And I'm the one naturally who kind of comes out, who recognizes I need to grow out of that. So that's the interesting part of this too. It was never a scolding. It was more of a Like this is showing me the truth of the matter about my behavior. And then when I had that truth, it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to live to that. I want to grow out of that. And you have kind of a natural compulsion to move through something, and that's what that did. And it kind of gave me energy. Actually, she makes me feel good. There's a little something she does here that makes me feel good. And to end this, but it's kind of a weird growth moment, and that's how she leaves that contact event. And then right before it ends, she shows me a future event is about to happen. Anyway, it's a whole, there's constant references to the future at this point. And so she shows me the future. And then when I get put back down, as I go back to the camp and I leave camping and go back to my work, I get laid off. And I felt something was going to happen, and I recorded it in a journal. And so it all becomes part of a larger thing that years later is part of how I put together that the contact event occurred. And yeah, so yeah, that's a wild one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm amazed that we've got these knowings of things to happen sometimes. Now my parents were together since the age of 16, and so they got married around the age of 22. And so my mom was in her, like, I think she was around 63 at the time. And the year prior to her death, all during the entire year, each time I'd see a lovely woman around the age of my dad, I tell myself, "Oh, wouldn't she go well with my dad?" And then it would hit me that why would I say that? My parents are still together, and I love them, and they're meant to be together till death. But for the entire year, I didn't understand why I had this feeling of
Yeah.
helping my dad meet somebody else
Yeah.
until my mom passed. And I was helping my dad going on these dating sites to help him find somebody else.
Yeah. And you're fulfilling the vision. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of something that, and that's a powerful reference. And it's, you got it. And I think it's a mixture of like, you know, you're creating a vision based off of something you know is going to happen, and so you end up fulfilling the vision about intuitively. Yeah, timeline. Obviously, like something is going to happen. You can feel it. Its presence is coming. Yeah, beautiful, very powerful. Love it.
Yeah. At the age of 19, so this would be your fifth contact event. You went hiking near Eagle Mountain, and that's where I
Yeah,
think you saw the elder again.
that's correct. Yeah, the elder again, one after the other, and it's a pretty at this point. Everything is great with the entities and they're just developing me. It's a really weird thing, right? I think when I presented this contact event, it got the least hits on YouTube, got the least amount of people interested in coming to the presentation. And even Susie, when we were editing the book, she said, it's kind of a boring contact event. And it's a really strange thing because when it's just great, there's nothing to report, basically. And I don't know that people know that can happen with entities. Like I wasn't the best I'd ever been with them. They developed me. We did kind of energy work. She did energy work on me. I played on a telekinesis device, and then she shows me the future again, that the rising is coming, and I don't understand what that means, but I'm whatever you got planned, I'm on board is how I'm feeling and communicating it. Basically, I'm like, okay, that's great, like what do I have to do to make this perfect? And she just says, keep doing what you're doing, but we need it to go smooth. And so she's preempting that something's around the corner, something big's around the corner, and I don't understand it. And that's it. And then yeah, it happens while I'm hiking over here Belcarra in BC and Lower Mainland. They picked me up on one side of the lake, dumped me off on the other, and I have the memory erased, and I don't. And I thought I made anyway. It's a whole weird game that ends up imprinting itself too as a weird event. But because I have a whole subconscious program to not look at this that they did to me in the first contact event, I brush it off, and only years later am I like, wait a minute, I did have a moment where I recalled not hiking the other half of the lake, and then made a whole thing about it in my head, like, oh, I don't really understand. I'll go back and do the hike again. And then that's it. And it's because the aliens picked me up on one side and dumped me off on the other, and a contact event happened in between. So yeah, wild stuff.
So what was the purpose of having the whole your energy work done on you?
Yeah, good question. Do I actually know? I don't. Actually, what she explains is that this will be used for later. Now, there are two things I could link them to. When I didn't have a lot of knowledge of what was coming ahead of me, she doesn't explain a lot. A lot of it is just kept in mystery. But one thing that will happen in the contact event, or sorry, in the rising, the consciousness event that will occur in the year 1997, is I'll end up having it's the first time ever I'll feel my chakras, and I'll feel it was in with me forever at that point onwards. I could feel while I was going through the rising, I could feel a culmination of energy at the top of my head. And I knew of chakras, but I definitely didn't have the intellectual knowledge to be like, oh, that's my chakra. Like I didn't think that way. This was the pre-internet, so you just didn't have a lot of this information, and I didn't know these details. I read about chakra somewhere, and that was kind of the end of it. And I would go do research later to understand that that was the crown chakra, and there was really a distinct sensation that something was that there was an energy culmination at the top of the head while going through the rising. And it really aligned with, the idea that it seemed to be a Kundalini rising. And so there was some kind of energy alignment that they created in me. And this seems to be one of the ways they created it. And they were emphasizing in this energy alignment device, my spine, and it's been now from all my Vedic knowledge and everything. Yes, and from all the science that matches all this, it's all the Kundalini, right? It's the Kundalini energy up the spine, and that what we call that, but it's the consciousness nonetheless. And they seem to have been exercising or energizing that. And what I would actually add to that, it's not that they rose my Kundalini, but with the latent memory of being turned into an orb, and then maybe a button that they pressed during the rising, I naturally had a Kundalini rising with the energy rising up my spine naturally. And they maybe kind of like this energy massage thing helped that occur naturally. Um, uh, that's one effect of it. The other very possible too is that it was a genetic activation. This DNA activation was part of the rising, and it could have been something to do with that too, where it's soothing or elevating my DNA. I'm not really clear, but I definitely know 100%, or I assume with pretty good certainty that it actually was part of the chakra thing that happened to me during the rising.
Do you think this might have helped you or changed you in a way that you could have been more in tune with your technology?
I think that happened during the White Room experience.
Okay.
Yeah, I think and yeah, and I don't have any other references for that except for the 10th contact event where I'm shown the AI running the craft and I can connect with it as the White Room. So I'm having a connecting experience with the craft as I'm seeing that it runs the craft, and I can feel it in my heart. So I'm aware that this thing is basically a God force. It's the God field, quantum field. And then I repeat that experience in the 22nd contact event where I'm actually on their tech and I'm using their computers, and I can feel like I'm imprinting into God. I don't have it. I mean, it could be, you could say quantum, but it's much more bigger. It feels so powerful. And I do originate that from the White Room. That ability to do that was the White Room.
So the craft isn't really alive per se.
Is it? It was. Sorry, did you say isn't?
Is the craft alive?
Yes, the craft is alive. I
Okay.
am 100%. The craft is alive. Yes, the craft is
Okay.
alive.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Um, Now when I do meditate, I can concentrate on my crown chakra and I could feel it,
Right.
the third eye. But I've never felt the actual Kundalini serpent go up my spine. So that must have been one hell of an experience, though. But how did it feel? Did it feel good?
I so I think I think something to be said about spirituality, the powers behind it, and the way things can culminate when you might be in a traumatic time, or you're or because what spirituality is a removal of self from the physical world. So you are contained and you're not your reality. Your reality is here, and then there's this other reality. And in fact, people can learn, uh, you can reflect what's inside you outwards and you can change your reality. But So did it feel good? It's a crazy, yes, it was a bliss state that I was in during the rising, but it's paired with my entire life falling apart and being fed strange ideas that I had to leave my life, and I didn't want to leave my life. I was a musician, and none of it made sense. And when nothing makes sense, you're getting into realms that can scare you if you don't know how to train your mind, and that's what ends up happening here. So I'm having this bliss state, but the bliss state was paired with, okay, you want to fully experience that bliss, then you got to leave your life. So it was this weird pairing of jump the ship and then you'll really experience bliss kind of thing. So you're almost getting a taste of it, so you're actually experiencing it. And if you want to live to that kundalini rising, you want to live to that serpent, if you will, you got to make the jump. And that's just a crazy state to be in. And yet there, only afterwards did I start reading Carl Jung. Like, I read Carl Jung before, but I found a really good reference to the idea that when the mind is under these types of stress, that it fractures the mind, and then that fracturing allows consciousness to sometimes emanate out of. And there's a real something going on about fracturing the mind and what trauma does, and how it creates a reorientation of your brain, and then you actually get kind of a pure consciousness experience. So how did it feel? Yes, it felt good, but it was paired with my brain, my world falling apart. So it is, and what that does, it probably amplifies that. So it amplifies the internal experience. So yeah, it felt good, but it was paired with my world falling apart. So
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
well, but you can't be, right? You can't be. I can appreciate that. I thank you. Yes. But I can't be a state where I'm like, oh, how awful that was, because look what created it, look what it became. So in the end, you have to recognize that pain is a part of life. And you also have to find ways to let go and be okay with that. That's the way it imprints. Life imprints with pain. And that's how you evolve out of, that's how you evolve, is by finding the way to never think of that as pain ever again. And I think that's the true evolution. Yeah.
One during an event, you were shown like an afterlife vision, and you were a past life as a Jew in Poland.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So so the first contact event, I I'm just witnessing the death of my last life, and that death is sad. So there's this. So going back, I'm in the white room. They turn me into an orb. Have an orb experience. Then the elder says, "Come in here." She becomes a portal. Go inside the portal, and the first thing I'm seeing is a dead body. And over top of that dead body is a sparkling, shimmering white light, and it's crying. It's crying. It's crying for the death of its last life. And as an orb, I'm having a shared experience, so I can feel it's me. I can feel the passage of time, that it was like 70 something years ago. But it's like all the erroneous information is cut out, so I don't know the details. And he's just sad. He's crying, and he's crying and crying, crying and going up. And then there's a whole afterlife sequence. Um, when I'm, when I'm, but what seeing my past life on an alien spacecraft did was begin the process of slowly gaining my past life awareness. And it starts very early. The real crunch of it started in 1997, before the rising, but only months before that I start having specific past life events kind of come out. One of them was seeing a Star of David over this water. And anyway, it was a vision. Actually, there was no Star of David, and I was kind of having a weird vision, and I was like, why am I seeing this? And I didn't understand it. And so you're having things kind of poke through. Basically, it was in my 20s. When did I actually really put together this past life? It's a good question, because it was in my 20s that the majority of my past life awareness started to really come out. And it was when I knew that they used asphyxiant gas, because I'd always had the choking thing as a child. I had dreams that I couldn't get air, and I was kind of choking, and it would be different types of dreams of like lack of air. And when I realized I had the inner chambers of a gas chamber down. And then that death was an asphyxiant gas. So it was carbon dioxide and you choked. You literally can't breathe air, and that's how they died in the gas chambers. And I knew that I had some latent trauma from it. That was basically it, was that I could feel I had some relationships with some friends who were there, and I could feel it, and I was getting visions from it. Um, and uh, and basically I just kept confirming for myself and confirming for myself. I would hear I work over by an airport, underneath the airport, so the planes fly over, and when a propeller plane flies over, I have flashbacks of the bomber planes going over Poland, and I realized where I saw the mountains, and I saw, yeah, and I had a dream after that, and I was protecting my little brother, and yeah, anyway, so yeah, it's awful because I was a Jew in Poland as they invaded, and he lived in the forest. I had full flashbacks in Prince George, BC, because the forest is similar to Poland forest. It's the type of dense, the forest up there in Prince George in BC here is very similar to the forest in Poland. And he was living in the freezing cold in the winter in the forest, trying to hide from the Nazis, terrified of his campfire being seen, terrified the Nazis were coming in at that moment, living on the edge, having to go out into civilization to find food. Yeah, and then eventually got caught and put into a concentration camp, and everyone died. I'm laughing now because we didn't die. And that's the crazy part, right? It's we didn't die, and you can contain all that latent pain, but then the pain is an illusion because you're like, oh, I'm still with all the people I love. Like that's all those people I loved. They're here. They're here now. So it's really weird. It's really weird to like you have a really really deep hard pain about that, and then in the end you're like, it's just an illusion. Like it's just an illusion. Doesn't mean that pain doesn't. I haven't fully figured out how to remove that pain. Not all of it, but some of it was just the loss. And in the end, I actually have a part in the workbook is some tricks I've used in how to move out of that pain. And one of them is through visioning, and it really works. And maybe that's why I'm laughing about it now. I'm able not to laugh, but to have a lighter spirit about that, because it's traumatic, but in the end, we can all move through it, right? So, yeah.
So yeah, your sixth contact event would be at the age of 20. This one I find fascinating, but because you had someone with you at the time,
Yes.
a friend
Yeah.
that you called Rob. So what happened?
Yeah. I spent the entire summer after the fifth contact event where they did that body stuff on me. The entire summer I was having like kind of psychic events. So it really seemed to be connected. The contact event, the fifth one, and then there's kind of this amplification of consciousness, if you will. And then the summer was over and I was going back to school. The night before going back to school, I went out with my friend Rob, went to a park, Minikata Park here, and there's a contact event right there. And this is one of the first hints for me presently that they were freezing time, because we're walking up a hill, and he turns to look, and then he's frozen and I'm frozen. And only in the memories, and as I reported everything, I was talking about it publicly already, I assumed that we were frozen by technology, like if something froze our body, and then we're frozen. And I'm actually aware, and I'm aware as the entity is moving up, looking at him. The entity flies up to his face, and I'm terrified because I'm not the me that knows them. So this is a whole bunch of weird things about the brain that all this stuff shows. I'm not the me that knows them. I'm aware in this moment. He's looking at my friend Rob, and I'm like, oh my God. And I have no way to process this. I'm just like freaking out. Just panic is what it is. You have no way to process what you're looking at, this alien thing. And you're like, I'm freaking out. And then all of a sudden I get it. He's going to come to me, that thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I got like really more scared, and it flies at me, literally flies. So I guess it's off of its feet floating or something. And it goes right up to my face. Bah. And I'm like, I'm screaming in my head. There's no voice because I can't speak. And I can feel it in me. And it's going through me. It must be in my eyes or something. And it's going through me. And he's like, this is the one. And then he touches something, and I'm like, oh, and I snap out of it, and I become the me that knows them. And I'm like, oh. And then there's this like transformation, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love these guys. And there's this weird thing of like complete panic, utter terror. You're experiencing a monster, if you will. It's a complete mind bend, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, these guys, and then great, this is okay, and you're like, okay, that's the way that went, and then you were walking away, and my friend is staring. His eyes are open, and he's staring off, just as if he was still frozen. And for the longest time, I just reported it that he was frozen, but over months, you're like, but his eyes remained open. Like that would have dried out his eyes, and unless we were frozen in time, like that, the whole thing doesn't make sense unless that's exactly what happened here. And I actually ask, what are you going to do with him? And he says, don't worry, we'll be back, or we'll be quick. And we go down this little hill, and there's a craft there. We go inside the craft, and he's confirming now there seems to have been some kind of alteration or change in my energy from the previous stuff. Something's developing, and he seems to be checking things, and I get these ecstasy experiences in my heart. And I I just, there feels like something electromagnetic is being tested, and he's got a device on his hand, and he seems to be measuring, testing something. And there's sensations all over the outside of my body as if there's like electromagnetic field, and it really seems to be interacting with my heart. And I feel like bliss from it. So whatever's happening here is touching things. And then he's like, okay, everything's good. So he had to check something. He sends me back down, and then I realize he's following me. And then I get back into my position, and then my mind is wiped. And it seems like possibly he did something with my friend, and I don't know. And my friend doesn't know. I actually reached out to him, and I couldn't find him, or I couldn't get a hold of him. But we end up having an insane night, and we have bliss all night long. We can't understand. And at the time, we don't think too much about it. But it's when the entire week, every day we got up, apparently he says this later to me, but I feel like ecstatic. I wake up with that same feeling. I wake up with it every morning, as if like, oh my God, I love life. You just love life. You can't figure it out. You're like, I don't know. I have a deep, deep feeling of amazing. Life is amazing. Love. I feel love. I'm happy. I don't enjoy. You have this depth in you. And then I call up my friend Rob, like for the Saturday of the weekend, the following weekend. And I'm like, hey, you want to hang out? And he's like, hey, have you been feeling amazing every day you wake up? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, that's weird. And he's like, I've been feeling amazing. He's like, do you think it has anything to do with our trip to the park, Minnetonka? And both of us connect it. It's such a weird event for me. I don't understand it, with just a mystery and no explanation. I recorded it in my journal, and that was the end of it. And because it got recorded, it would help me put together. And when I had the flashbacks, it was like, oh, that's a goddamn freaking contact event. I had flashbacks about it and put the whole thing together. And yeah, so it's a really weird contact event.
That's amazing. Well, I've got everything in a presentation, so that really helps to at least go back into my old memories, because sometimes I forget about stuff, and sometimes I write on Facebook when something happens. So for the past 3 months, I've been getting like these contacts at night. Again, the body taps would start coming back, which stopped for like 7 years. And coincidentally, my mom's death happened. Well, the anniversary at least was like a few weeks ago. So,
oh, wow.
So yeah, that could have been like a corroborating factor, a catalyst.
Yeah, they're all related. They're interacting with our lives individually. This is the one thing the researcher, I think, has problems with, is that the fact that it would do that, it would interact with a personal event in your life, is the mind-blowing element to this. And create synchronicities around it. You have a magical event happen that seems, phenomenon related around an event that's so personal and private to your individual life. Yeah.
Now, were you close with your grandmother? Because at the age of 20, you have this, which is the seventh contact event. You heard your grandmother call you.
No.
Oh,
I'm calling the grandma. I'm calling her. I'm saying grandma's calling me. Grandma. I'm actually talking about her. And it's interesting to me because all I'm doing is waking up to these memories, and I'm sitting there, what? What am I doing? Like, that's how I was when I get these memories back. You're like, what am I doing at the age of 20 or whatever? Like, I'm calling her grandma, and I'm like, I can't believe it, but I'm so comfortable. And so I put this information in the book because it's so important that that's exactly what I was doing. I'm so relaxed. I'm so comfortable. I'm so in love with these guys at that point. So yeah, as I'm driving home from on St. John's Road here in Port Moody in the Lower Mainland, and it's like 1 or 2 in the morning. And yeah, and I become the me that knows them. And I'm saying to myself, grandma's calling, grandma's calling. So it's actually, it's I'm calling the elder grandma. Yeah, it's a funny miscommunication there. But it's I was calling her grandma. And it's because she is a quote unquote elder. She oozes a mother, elder, older woman feel. Like she would be like I'm interacting with a 70-year-old human woman. Is very much what this feels like, an older woman. And she, well, yeah, grandma. So that's why I was calling her grandma. And yeah, that was the end of the blue. It's an end of a period with them. So I become the me that knows them while driving, saying, grandma's calling, grandma's calling. I pull over, and I'm just left in mystery, but I can feel her presence, which is why I knew to say that, which is also really interesting. Grandma's calling, and yet I didn't see her physically, and so I can feel her presence, and she seems to really be egging on that point here. So I get out of the car, and I can feel the craft without seeing it, and they really seem to want me to do this at this point. And I walked up underneath, like there were streetlights in the alleyway, and I'm under the alleyway, and I can kind of hear it. Like there's kind of a hum, like a buzz, and I can feel it's there, and I can feel she's kind of like holding off, and it's a distinct feeling. I just like a craft is sitting there, and in the book I analyze. I don't even really know, is this the genetics in me? Is this because I tuned into them or I had the white room experience? I've already had craft experience, so I can feel these things. I don't really know. Yeah, and then she puts me inside, so kind of like beams me in, and this is where I learned about the Federation of Planets. That's how she frames it. She shows me a Federation object, and it's a consciousness device, and basically gives impressions. It's like imparting information about planets that work together, planets that come together with agreements, and a fascinating piece is that at the top of the Federation object was a gem, and the gem was a computer, like an AI runs the Federation. That's what it was basically like, but a sentient organic AI. So it's not AI. It's not what we humans know as AI. It would be life, and it might be dimensional life, as a sentient computer, organic computer, and and then that's when she says, "Okay, we need something from you," and she ends up putting basically a message in my mind that they need my biology. And this is where the biological stuff starts. And I didn't know it would go here. So a real duplicity starts, a real separation starts. It's quite start here, but I'm shocked at it, at the request that they need my biology. And as a man, it's the biology only a man can provide. So it's that biology. And that's what she's emphasizing. But what's really fascinating, and I report all the details in the book, I get as clean about it as possible, unemotional about it as the telling of as possible, but emotional about allowing my who I was at the time to be shocked because he was shocked. But they don't see it these ways. They don't see it the way humans see it, and they see us as plants. The bodies are just an aspect of existence, yet you are not your body. And there's a detachment that they have that was very obvious to me in the moment. Even though I probably didn't have that level of awareness of myself, they have that level about me. So it's a strange, like that's how some of these for those who don't know how the biological events can occur to people, or how someone like me can talk and you have biological events and you're still talking about it, it's you can talk about it because of this. And I feel like I'm for the first time articulating this the proper way. I don't have the level of awareness of myself as not being at that time as not being my body, but they have that level of awareness of me. And so it's not biological. It's nothing to do with the words, the R words that humans can have, and the violation and all that. It's not what they were, and that's not what this was. And so, but I don't have a way of articulating that or understanding in the moment, so I am shocked. But when she imparts it, she's doing it through her eye. Like she's kind of got me into this hypnotic thing. And I'm feeling like compassion from her. I'm feeling like we need this from you. And I'm feeling her detachment from it, like that's a kind of a plant thing, like as if my biology is a plant and giving semen is like plants and seeds. Actually, another way I frame it in the book is it would be like human sexualizing taking seeds from a plant. Like as if, we need like pea pods or something, and you're taking all the seeds, and that's not sexual to us. And it's the same thing with aliens. It's just biology. And also there were some fascinating things to learn. She saw the merging of genetics as both mathematical, spiritual, and kind of a sacredness for life. Like they actually saw value in making life, and there was a very spiritual thing for them to make life, to make physical bodied life. That was actually a spiritual process for them. I think that was also very interesting and telling about the reality about aliens involving themselves with humans in these ways. And not just that, I didn't have any of the math or science that DNA merging is mathematical, actually. For humans, it's mathematical, and there's a whole DNA sequencing process that is mathematical by nature. That was news to me. And I could feel that impression from the elder about this, and only to do research about it later on, learning that that was a real thing, that it is actually mathematical. So that's how it ends, this period, because they're now going to initiate their rising, which will get me to go traveling. And so it's a really crazy way to cap it off, and slightly traumatic for a human, but that's how it is with the Greys. So that's what happened. And then, yeah.
Regarding the process, that they took your seed, I think did you feel like being forced upon by this female hybrid?
She's talking about the eighth contact event when it was when she gets on
Yeah,
top of
because
me.
we were talking about, you have to having to like to give your seed away. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. At the time, at the time, the best way to frame it is that I was too intimidated. And it's so I was like compliant out of intimidation. Not that they intimidated me, but that I was very aware of the power that they have. The freezing time, the way that they're able to move in and out of my life without anybody knowing is in and of itself intimidatingly powerful. And there's a sense of that. And yet they themselves never display any type of coercion or aggression, um, uh, any type of all the negative connotations that humans have about that kind of stuff. It never got displayed. But at first I was complying because I'm like, what have I done to myself? I got myself in this crazy agreement, and now this is where it went. And at first, as it starts happening, which starts in the eighth contact event while I'm traveling, there is a sense of, okay, just get it over with. Do it and get it over with. What I didn't expect is it for it constantly happening. So the entire year, 1998, was nothing but, right? It was, okay, no, that's wrong to say, not nothing but. It was a bunch of sequence of events, and every time they were taking it. But again, what becomes really weird and fascinating is they start merging me giving my biology with getting information from them. And they almost like they knew that that was an exchange. So they were almost very happy to give me events where I could ask questions and answer and learn things, because this was an exchange, and they got my biology. It gets really extreme at the end of 1998, to the point that I don't want them in my life anymore. And when they end it, they cap it off with showing me my higher self was behind it, that I agree to it on another level, and that to this day I'll not deny that is accurate. And so again, it all comes to the level of the higher self. And would I any human can have bad things happen to them, right? You can be a person who gets hit by a car and your spine is messed up for the rest of your life. Your parents can die when you're young. Bad things can happen to humans all over the place. And relatively, I had a pretty good existence. And so would you want that to be your thing? Or, this crazy experience with aliens? Or do you want to have a normal human existence where you break your leg and you can never run properly for the rest of your life? Something like that. And that's what it feels like. It was an exchange on some level of the higher self. And so I do actually agree with that. I think that that's actually very accurate. And so in the moment, yeah, I hated it. And in the exact moment, I didn't fight because I felt intimidated by them. but also you're getting information. So it's a weird kind of like exchange that came out of it. But you can't stop it being weird to the human. It's just, it was always weird to the human. It was always weird to me, and it got out of control, and it felt like that. And then when it ended, it just ended. And so it also was really weird. It's hard to argue it, right? Because when it ended, it ended. There's no game here where they're like, oh, we told you it ended, but we didn't, and now we're back 4 years later and we still want it from you. And none of that occurred. It was for a period of time, and when it ended, it ended. And because I actually feel very secure about that too, and it's obvious to me that that's real, I'm given space to move on from what occurred. So there's kind of an emotional healing that can occur from it. And then I can almost like, there is a forgiveness, but not a forgiveness, because this is just the way it rolled out, and it's kind of the timeline thing. So
So would this be the event where you actually agreed to well, I think you gave your seat away, and then like as a candy or as a gift, you were allowed to do something, and then you told you you want to come to Venus, and that's
yeah, yeah. So okay, so I go through this consciousness event, the end of 1997. It tells me to leave my life to go travel. I go travel, and I'm on Hornby Island over here in BC, and isolated, remote, and I'm a backpacker, and I'm pushing all my limits. I'm trying to embody what this consciousness event was, which is a spiritual awakening. So I felt like I had to do. I didn't feel like I had to. I was being called from my own soul to push the limits of what I was given, because I was trying to make sense of it. So then I was being, the movie Into the Wild, Into the Wild. The guy goes to Alaska. He eventually dies in Alaska. But that, I know his spirit, and that's the spirit I had traveling. You're isolating yourself from society, and you're an adventurer. You have a drive for spirit, and you're learning, and you have a lust for life, and you want to be on the edge of existence to feel it fully. And that's what was going on with me now. And I isolated myself on Hornby Island. I was on the beach in the middle of the night, and I saw a red orb. And the red orb was stationary, and I didn't know what to make of it. I thought possibly it was a flare. It didn't act like a flare, didn't have any of the signs of a flare, but I didn't really know what it was. And then it went away, went lowered into the forest, and I thought, okay, it's done. And then I was concerned something was in the forest, and then I was concerned about sleeping in my tent, and I felt, no, I'm intuitively everything's okay. Well, it turned out there was a contact event, and I felt it, but I didn't understand it. And so what happened was they came down on the beach. I become the me that knows them, and learn the consciousness event that I had gone through, this insane thing that had now destroyed my mind, boggled my brain, tore up everything in my life, had me abandon everything, was them. Was this agreement I made with them like years ago, was something we were developing and working towards, and I couldn't. It's just, there will be no human will ever, anyway, there's no words to capture that insanity, and to learning about that event. And I was crying, and I tried to report it as much as possible, how the emotions and stuff. And she takes me up to a spacecraft, we get taken up to a space base. So now, for the first time, after having been with them on crafts, now I'm going into bases. And so there isn't a there's now things have moved up to a level, and that's the sensation here. Things have elevated, and so you're kind of getting rewarded right away. I'm on a space base, and I was seeing other entities on this base, and I was like, like, oh my God, this is amazing. And no entity cares that I'm there. Like, no entity is like a human. You think you might be like, oh, what's this, a human? And there's nothing like that. It's all like they were ignoring me, like they didn't really care that I was there. And she takes me to a room. My clothes get off, and she analyzes there's a thing that goes through my body, takes a hologram, takes a picture perfect 3D replication of my body, basically. And then I can see it on a tablet, and it's like three-dimensional. I can see the inside organs and everything. It's really fascinating. And then she says, go in there. And yeah, there's an exchange. There is a moment between me and a hybrid, and it's a very quick moment, but it is disturbing. And that's the moment where I'm like, okay, I gave it to them. I gave them what they wanted. There, are you happy now? Kind of thing. And I was highly uncomfortable from it. But then for them, it's all like nothing. They're like, okay, great. Now, thank you for doing this. This was an amazing task. That's how they thought of it, the whole development from the first contact event to even where we were at that point. And they're like, we're grateful for, what happened. Do you, what would you like in return, basically, kind of reward, exchange. So I want to know where you live. I want to know how you live. What human doesn't want the answers to these questions? And she says, we live on Venus. And you're like, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And it just didn't. It didn't make any sense. So she's like, okay, we go down to this level. She's communicating with someone telepathically that eventually meets us, and it's a humanoid. And then she's like, do you want to show him where we live? So everything is friendly between these beings. And there's a real sense of like community or higher level understanding between them. And the humanoid is very friendly. Like, and he's a teenager, which is really neat too. Like, they kind of paired me up with a humanoid that looks my age. I was 20 at the time, and he was 20, or he wasn't 20, but he had the feeling of being a young teenager guy like me. And he was like, sure. And he was all like open hearted and super duper friendly. It's like smiling all through telepathy. And so then me and him leave, and the elder gets left behind. So now I'm paired up with this really friendly guy, and it's like super relatable. We both get into a craft, and then he teaches me how to drive the craft. So I end up flying the craft from Earth to Venus. As unbelievable as this story sounds, I knew where Venus was in the solar system at the time of the memories. I have a whole video where I drew it out, then found out where it was in April of 1998, and I was bang on right where Venus should be in the solar system in April of 1998. The Earth was right here, and Venus is right over there. The sun was right there, and I flew there in the craft, and then he takes over, and he flies down into Venus, and there's a city out in the open. And no explanation is given how that could even be possible. Um, we land on a landing pad outside the city. The city is obscured largely by a lot of like moisture or clouds, and the atmosphere is basically mustard yellow, orange verging mustard yellow, light mustard yellows with orange. And the craft lands, and then we get out in the atmosphere, like we can walk out. And and I ask, like, can we breathe the air? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And he says the air is normal. He doesn't explain anything, and he walks out, and I walk out. Years later, after presentation, it's just a theory that this is dimensionally phased, and that the whole entities can phase dimension, cities, bases, crafts, everything, and be in the environment. Individuals can't see those objects, and those objects don't interact with the environment as well. And there's a kind of a reciprocal where you can be out on the open in the atmosphere in Venus, and you don't feel the effects, which would answer how some contactees are on the moon and don't feel, and they're out on the open in the moon. And it's because like the only answers to these things are that there's a phasing going on. That's the assumption anyway. And yeah, I basically get shown his place. He lives in like a condo, what humans would call a condo. The city is like leisure. Like, there's gray aliens, and I think that they're mantis entities. I'm pretty certain they're like a mantis type species that I saw as well too. I wouldn't put that together until I meet my own mantis who was running the program. And there's humanoids, and maybe there's other species that I couldn't recognize or something. But the gist of it is that was what I was seeing, a bunch of these groups leisurely walking around and entertaining themselves and talking. I saw holograms, and so it's like a mall. I can't really explain it without the e-commerce. So it's like a big area of gathering and people leisurely hanging out and relaxing. And so I get taken up to his place. He shows me his place. I meet his mother, and then I get taken down, and I get shown the elder's place. And eventually I meet the elder, and I'm seeing she lives like this as well too. And it sounds very humanized, but I just keep finding corroborations, weird corroborations, connecting pieces, not just with other contactees. There was an EBO scientist. I don't know, Mr. Gray, if you ever saw that EBO scientist who posted on Reddit, 20,000 upvotes. And Joe Rogan ended up talking about him too. And he's a scientist who ended up analyzing a gray alien body. and he had provided all this detailed research that matches tons of my details, tons of tiny details of my contact event. And one of them is that the gray aliens drink, that they actually do drink, drink liquids. And I see the elder on Venus drinking a liquid, and it's a kind of a yellow, like a mustard, a tomato paste look to it, tomato sauce look to it, and apparently they have to drink things with high copper content. So there's all these weird crossovers that sound absolutely made up and unreal, and it was real, and it's not made up. And I physically went there, not in dream, not in astral. This happened to me, and yeah, the corroborations continue. I keep finding people who've actually been to Venus, and that was that. Basically, get sent back down, put back in the craft, taken back to Earth. I'm back in my tent. I wake up feeling like I had been at a contact event. That's the first time ever at the age of 20 that I actually thought something had happened to me. And I actually wake up saying they were here. And I only knew something to do with the Rising, this consciousness event, the entities or whoever was responsible for it, they had shown up that night. And I had no other way of knowing that. And I just felt something had occurred, and I couldn't even imagine what it actually was. And so when the memories of alien contact come out, this night becomes a really highlighted. I'm certain that was an event because of the way it felt. Yeah, so that's that.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so envious. Now, wasn't Valiant Thor a Venusian as well?
Yes, he is. His story is very weird. Phil Schneider's the kind of one who really tries to corroborate it. Yeah, it's just a bizarre story. I don't really know what to think of it. The other element that I really keep driving home is like so I go to Venus, this other city with high level entities, after I had the Rising. So I'm in my highest state. And then I'm able to go to a high state city, is kind of what it is. Valiant Thor talked about God. He talked about unity. And and then someone pointed out the raw. I don't follow these things, the raw channels or something like that. So apparently that's Venetian. I don't know. So I was like, well, that's a weird connection. And and I've met 3 other people who've been to Venus, and Susie Hansen is one of them as well too. So yeah, and they go to cities on Venus. Actually, all those people go to a city, and they say the words city. So it's a really weird thing. Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, I can only speak to my own experience. The end of it.
Back in I think 2018 or 19, flew down to Laughlin for the Star Wars USA conference.
Yeah.
And during the experiencer meetup in the morning where we get up and we talk about our experiences, after I was the first to speak up. The lady after me was elderly, in maybe mid 70s, early 80s, and she had a huge speech impediment. But the thing is, long story short, she during an event had in her mind telepathically heard this man tell her like he's from Venus and wants to enter her body to feel what it meant to be human.
Right.
So for a time, he was in her body, and of course she agreed. And one time, I'm not now. It's been a while, but I think she was in her car. They were on a bridge, and the bridge might have collapsed, and everybody fell down right from a certain height,
Wow.
really. And during the fall, she felt somebody grab her head, and that saved her life. Basically, she came out of it with the huge speech impediment because her jaw was a bit crooked. But hearing her story was very emotional. From that moment on, I think her husband was also like working for like a 3-letter agency, but in Europe. And she would start doing these C5s or like gathering with people. And one time she heard a knock on the door, like a US like general, let's say, was at the door and wanted to come in. So she agreed. But the thing is, behind her were 2 men in black. And she was spooked so much looking at these. I think they were like identical, and
Right.
felt something felt off. But yeah, so I just love hearing these stories about like Venusians, and I'm not sure what to
Yeah.
make of it. But yeah.
Even I don't know what to make of it. And but I am convinced that a phased thing is going on. And if that's the case, then probably all the planets have something going on, a city or life. And aren't we apparently now not like we're not welcome back on the moon? And actually that's part of it, is that there's a whole, and when you hear these stories, we think physical, right? Like I remember being, before I woke up to all the memories, I was going down the rabbit hole of this information. I would hear about aliens on Mars, or aliens on Mars, or aliens on the moon. And you think to yourself, no way, because that would mean that they're in a base underground. And who's really going to live in a base underground? I mean, that's where you really go. Your physical brain can't really wrap your head around it. And then you realize the dimensional aspect is actually looking very solid as a theory. Um, and then people are reporting things like cities and, walking around on the moon. Then these ideas that the stuff is phased opens up ideas that all of this could be very real. And you're right. What does that make for us in our reality, right? And yeah, I love it too. It's fascinating to hear that story. I really appreciate you sharing it.
Do you in your book, do you talk about an immaculate grid?
Yes, that's right. A connecting piece to that grid as I see it as a child, actually. And I'll learn it's a gray alien genetic grid. So they're aware of it, and they're aware of all the humans who have gray alien DNA. And and I'll be explained later on that they put a hybrid species on the planet. So there's this idea that their genetics have proliferated through the human population, and that there's, I would estimate from this grid only, an estimation into the millions. So, and tens of millions of humans out of the 8 billion have a gray alien marker in them. And then they're aware of all that and they keep track of it with their tech on the back end. And as a child, I saw it, not knowing what it was. It's in my fourth childhood contact event that I see it, and I do get explained. You'll learn what this is later. And then during the afterlife vision in the white room, I'm witnessing my higher self at this grid, and so the grid is now a whole, like as if a whole room or a big space, and you could literally just float around, and every nodule was a grouping. And I'm not convinced it's the physical grouping. So not like a family grouping, but a soul grouping. So this is all just kind of like you start getting into the science of the afterlife and the science of birthing into the bodies. And it seems like there's something very organized. And in the groupings there's soul groupings. And I'm kind of convinced the higher self will switch around with the soul groupings, but throughout different lives. But so he was able to go in and open them up, and you get a grid of like interlaced beings who are all connected with each other. And then you can move out, and that's integrated with other nodules, and that's the population, the human planetary population. So it's very aware of what it's tracking, or what it's not just tracking the bodies, it's tracking their effects on other people. So it's tracking a collective consciousness, actually, and how everyone is interacting with each other. And so it's huge. Like this is like quantum scales of information about just individual human existence. And the higher self is interacting with this nodule. The very first day I went public, July 5th, 2020, in the audience was a contactee who also saw a grid. And the exact same thing. It was the nodules. You'd go in, you'd interact with it. I was like, what? Like, that's a crazy thing to have a synchronicity about, or have a corroboration. And it was just the beginning of the reality that every time I go public, someone else has got a corroborating story about a tiny detail of the story of my own contact event. And that the idea that this is existing, that when we kind of in the afterlife, this makes sense if space and time are illusions. If time is the illusion and consciousness is originating in kind of a no space, no time, then as you're making a plan to manifest in space and time, and you are trying to develop the ethereal body, each and us, our higher selves are trying to develop us, then it just makes sense that all of this information is kind of laid out somewhere for the higher self to make plans, to make a specific plan. I'm going to develop the ethereal body so it does this and this and this, so it can be used for that and this and this and other lives. And yeah, it's just an insane scale of information and unbelievable, but I'm pretty certain is real. At least for me, I believe that existence would be kind of layered out in these ways. So yeah, fascinating stuff.
And complicated.
Highly complicated,
Very.
yes. And I'm only telling you pieces of it. I can't even begin to imagine, because what I'm saying to you, I'm saying things like what the life will do. Well, so what are you trying to tell me? Every moment is late. Like I can't even begin to imagine myself. Like, oh, does that mean the event that happens when he's 10 years old is labeled like layered out in that grid? Like, you know what I mean? So much detail. Yeah, it's insane.
When I read this, well, at first I thought you were talking about, I had this lady on, this guest on my show, like last year. She had this experience with a grid where she had an out of body experience and she was floating up into space and her head banged into something. And that's where she saw this entire grid that's been surrounding the planet, which stops humans from leaving the planet while having an out of body experience. So I thought it was that at first, but it was clearly not. So
Interesting. Well, what's really interesting about that is that's the context with which the person I had a collaboration with, that was her context, was a grid. So it was nodules. So that's a really weird, like the person I met is an in between of what you're talking about and what I'm talking about. So she saw it over the planet, but it was nodules, and you would go in the nodules, and so it was a plasma grid over the entire planet. And I didn't see that. I didn't see a grid over top of the planet. I saw a kind of a grid in the afterlife that could be used, but it's the same style where there was the lines and then the nodules were like soul collections. But she saw it over the planet and she was explained it all. And that, yeah, it was over the planet. You can go into individual ones, and she has a whole thing where she goes into the meditations about it. And in the afterlife vision, the only thing I see is that I'm aware that the afterlife itself is an actual purposeful veil. And I say that in the book. So the idea that there might be some other kind of math or physics or astral mechanisms or spiritual mechanisms that create that, such as a grid, which I wasn't shown to me, because that's maybe just a lot of detail to show me. So very fascinating. Yeah, that something bigger seems to be going on there. Totally.
you talked about Susie Hansen.
Yeah.
I love Susie. She's my great auntie.
Yeah, that's great.
So how did you find her?
Um, uh, she is the beginning of it all, actually.
Yeah.
The day I discovered I had alien contact, I was in a conundrum. So it was July 1st, 2019. I went out to the location of my second contact event. And that's where I discovered I could feel that, as I mentioned in the beginning of our interview, I could feel that something else had happened. And just having that feeling, I knew it, like, oh my God, where's this gonna go? I didn't know where it was gonna go. I was terrified, actually. I was scared to myself to learn what it meant. And I immediately needed help. But because I knew it was tied to this consciousness event, I was stuck with something. From having Vedic philosophy and all the spiritual experiences I've had, I know many humans don't believe in spiritual, or vice versa. They think spiritual is this thing and that thing, and it's just kind of made up in the brain. And I believe in spiritual, but I don't really know. And so you have all these opinions about it. And I can't have that. I couldn't have, because I knew what was happening to me was real. I couldn't have someone involving themselves with me, telling me what they thought had happened to me. And I needed my memories. If I was going to go down this rabbit hole, I needed to be not tainted by. I had to be with the right person. And I didn't know what to do. And so I recall coming back home. I think I turned on the TV. Literally on the TV was a in my YouTube feed, synchronistically, a video about screen memories. I never searched for the word screen memory in my search feed. I never have that video. I've never seen that video again. I know the video's real, but anyway, it answered for me. It was like as if I went out looking for screen memory. I come back home and there's a video about screen memories. It was like, I need to watch this. And it confirmed there was actually evidence. There's stories of evidence of, people seeing cars crashed. I think it was 4 people saw a pileup of red cars all crashed up together, and they all had the same screen memory, and it turned out to be alien contact. And so the aliens are obviously the ones. So it was teaching me, right, that the aliens did this to me. They put the screen memory in me. Anyway, I was terrified. Bottom line was, I didn't know what to do, and I needed the word spiritual to be part of me getting these memories out. So I did an actual Google search, spiritual alien abductions or something like that. And Susie Hansen was in the feed, or in the search queue. And at the time, she was associated with, I think it's her website, Communicator Link. So I think she was maybe associating Communicator Link with some other researchers at the time. I'm not really clear. I can't remember the detail. The website looked differently than it does now, though. And she that was it. I had her kind of saved, if you will. I saw her, and I think I sent an email a day or days later. And I basically, you can't, the problem is with alien contact, there's so many resources now, but at the time I didn't quite understand how to get those or what to trust or what to look for. So you just sound like a nut job when you're sending an email about memories like this. You're like, oh, I think I've been abducted. I'm waking up to the memories, and there's no way to frame it. And so she didn't respond. And I kind of just left it like that. And I couldn't, and then I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. I wasn't privy to thinking hypnotic regression was the answer. I didn't think that way at all. I just didn't know what to do with it. And then the book has out the story about what happens next. I go down the rabbit hole of the mystic book first. Then that's happening. The flashbacks are coming back, and I still don't know what to do. I probably started the process of taking the hypnotic regressions, recording everything, then having the flashbacks, recording everything, then doing hypnotic regressions. I was probably midway to the first 3 or 4 contact events. I might have emailed her one more time. And I actually, this time, was trying to offer money. It was like, please, like, I see you offer hypnotic regressions. I want to know more. And I'm looking for support. The person doing hypnotic regressions with me here was just a hypnotic regressionist. They were not an alien contactee. I had no research. I had no human who knew anything about aliens in my world at the time. And only my friends and family. And some of them were like, what? Okay. And they were being open because, I'm a pretty balanced individual. So they were like, okay. They were just trying to learn about it the same way I was, but I didn't have anybody at the time. And then I eventually found someone here local in Vancouver UFO. So Vancouver UFO here, the local group. And then that's when it all started, the public stuff. They were interested. They wanted to know more. And then eventually that turned into online presentations of my contact events. And that's how that all blew out. I went back to Susie. Eventually I got her book. That's what happened. I eventually got her book and read her book. And she was just a person I wasn't talking with, but I was like, oh my God, I have so much. She was answering a ton of my own experiences. She was helping me understand my stuff. I started seeing her interviews. I saw her interview with Grant Cameron. And then I sent her an email. I think, it's my book. It was I invited her to do a presentation at Vancouver UFO. She agreed. I sent her a book. Then that's it. Once she had my book and had done the interview, I was like, would you want to help me re-edit my book? I could really use it. She read it fully and she said, I'll do it. And that was it. And then that started the process, and we started meeting once a week. It was amazing, just amazing. And she's just so knowledge, right? 30 years, right? And also, never mind her experience researcher. She's just a researcher, and that's 30 years of just experience of research, 30 years of research. So her experiencer stuff is separate. It's just epic. She is just the best person in the world, and so grateful for her. I couldn't have done it without her, actually. And I needed her intimate knowledge, because even people think that the UFO field is filled with a whole bunch of kooks who all want to hear about aliens. And what's the reality is that we all fight with each other. and a lot of people hate gray aliens, and a lot of people think that they're demons. And I was up against like a battle of, never mind people not believing you, you have people who do believe you and think you're being screwed over by them. And it's just filled with a whole bunch of venom. And I needed someone who is just as detailed as her, who believed me fully, understood the way the aliens interact with humans. That was therapy at the same time. Going through and editing the book, it was therapy. So eternally grateful for Susie. And she's an amazing, amazing individual. And I will always be there for her for everything she did for me. So, yeah.
One this event in your book, at first when I read it, I cried actually.
Wow.
The Greys are going to have a book of names of people that helped out with disclosure or helped with the like humanity's consciousness rising. So
Yeah.
can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yannick, man, I'm 100% convinced you and me, like, we're warriors to them, right? We are facing the onslaught of a world who despises and disagrees, and like their society doesn't have this. Their society is everyone's on the same page and knows all information. And this discordance of information is a recipe for a planetary disaster, a societal and planetary disaster, just like it's about to occur. And we're at the frontier of all this. All of us are. Every single one of us are. And they showed that to me. They showed me that in the 25th contact event as a way of motivating me that you'll be in history. Not just that, you'll be in our history, the gray alien history. And it's filled with hundreds and hundreds of names of people who are, you know, authors, but everything. Like, yes, the podcast people, everybody who's at the frontier of all this stuff. In the end, we're part of history. And the surprising similarity to me is Christianity in the Roman era. Not that we're being persecuted, but some of us got persecuted. You know, I think we're in an era now where it's almost like the Christian empire is about to take over the Christian religion is about to take over the empire. So it's kind of like 200 years later. But still the same idea that we're at the forefront of changing minds. And you can only imagine the role that you have, that, you know, here I am, I'm talking publicly, but you invited me. You made the platform. You did it. And not just that, like, you know, you have your own experiences. You're an experiencer too. And all the experiencers, all the people who I know who are publicly doing something were visited. And there's like, I can't even, I think every single interview, you go to my playlist and all my interviews are held by people who have had contact. It doesn't have to be physical contact. They were visited in some kind of dream state. And they had a synchronicity. They had a dream state vision. And then all of a sudden they wake up and they look outside and there's a freaking orb. And they're like, okay. And now they feel compelled to do a podcast. And now what they're doing is they're a face. They're out there doing stuff. You're adding to the information flow to educate the public about alien contact. And that is invaluable to the entities who are up there watching all this stuff. I think that's what the bottom line is. We are invaluable to them. We are so valuable educating the public. And an example of this is that I get visited every time I have a presentation. They love me speaking publicly, and that motivates me too. I'm like, yeah, I had a visit. I saw, and they will do like cool effects in the sky, and I'll see fun things, and I'm in love with it. And I feel like it's a fun relationship that I do this, and I see them. And it's because I'm speaking and I'm helping with the public image. I'm helping with all this stuff, and all of us are doing that. We're all kind of a role in it, and it's absolutely epic, this stuff. And you know, I can't, even the past, even all the things in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. An example of that, there was a Scottish, what was he? A Scottish ambulance driver. I can't remember here. I don't remember the name. He's from the 80s. And he had a prolific, a scary contact event. Now, the contact event itself didn't harm him, but there were some disturbing things in the contact event. And I agree. And of course, that would be disturbing. But even as I look back and translate it in my own frame of reference, I'm saying, well, I think the aliens are trying to figure humans out. I think in the early days, they were trying to understand things. So he was witnessing pain. He was witnessing a gray alien in pain and a human in pain. And I think that they're measuring and they're analyzing and they're trying to understand things. And apparently the gray alien was trying to adapt to the human environment and they put a gray alien into space. Anyway, whatever. It's a crazy contact event. But what happens to the guy? He becomes a paranormal investigator, becomes a UFO field investigator in the 80s. And I think the aliens know those details. They would know we're going to do this to him and it's going to launch something. He's the type of mind and type of heart that's going to go all the way down with this and do something public against societal pressures, right? That's the big thing here. The aliens are very aware we're stuck in our matrix and we're stuck in our societal pressures. And so you're fighting against societal pressures. They would love that. Me, I'm fighting against societal pressures. They love that. And it's because this stuff is truth. And so, yeah, it's big picture that they seem to always be aware of. And you're a warrior, Yannick. You're a warrior, man. Just be aware of that. Yeah.
My instigator was 'cause growing up, I didn't know anything about ETs. Living up in northern Ontario at the time, and in the woods, having like 2, 3 channels on TV, black and white TV,
Right.
bunny ears and all that. So I didn't know anything about ETs, but yeah, I had these events that happened to me as a child, stopped when I was I was being like brainwashed in school, but as soon as I finished college, started back up again.
Right.
And so I had these events, but I didn't know what to make of it until I met this child gray abductee from England, which I almost married. And so she got me involved in this. And what got me, I always wanted to do a few interviews here and there, but I didn't think I'd be doing this like full time. I do have a day job, of course, but one time back in 2012, I was meditating. And just before going to bed, as soon as I hop into bed, close my eyes, I see this sort of black and white TV or projection on my left eyelid. And what I'm seeing was the side view of an old typewriter, and somebody was typing. You know, those typewriters with old cylinders that you'd push.
Yeah.
So I was seeing that. So the impression I had from that was whatever was showing me, wanting me to blog my story. So the next day I go on this site which my fiance at the time was on.
Yeah.
And I write everything down. That's it. So that same day, the day after the event, I start meditating again, not expecting anything. I didn't know what happened to me the night prior. So I go to bed. Instead of seeing that black and white box with the typewriter, I'm seeing a black and white box, but 2 hands shaking on it. Like saying, like, job well done.
Oh, shaking. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Shaking, yeah,
awesome.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it, man. I love it. I think that's fantastic. There's, this is big picture stuff. So on Reddit, came out was a John Keel document. And it's the problem is that the military is the only ones who get this information. And then when they give it out, they leak it out somehow, or someone steals it or whatever, they give it to someone. It's always tainted with this kind of like preservation military perspective, and they're missing out. Humans are destroying the planet or having problems with the planet. They're missing out the spiritual dimensional aspect of the self, of the human self. Never mind that we might learn they might say the aliens are paranormal, but what about the human? And the aliens are really emphasizing the human element of this. So like they always kind of miss information and they distort it. And but this John Keel document written in the 1967 has now what's happening. It describes exactly what's happening now. People are saying they have alien genetics. The aliens themselves, and some of the wording that from my book is in that goddamn document. So I'm now looking back saying, this is it. The aliens told me, we told them the plan a long time ago. That's it. Well, they're going to put their genes into our bodies. So eventually over time, we evolve within kind of a hybridization, basically. And it's a natural process as these beings kind of operate in nature and using quantum tech to do it. And part of the document has a whole thing about people waking up midlife. So it answered my whole thing, that they would wake up midlife to being a part of it without even knowing they're a part of it. And that the aliens, the entities they use control. no one's controlled. I've never experienced a single essence of control. But military, right? They think that, oh, this foreign actor is coming in to infiltrate humans, and they think it very military. But it describes this. It describes the aliens are looking for leaders. The aliens will waken up people to become leaders. And I thought, like, our own human world hates the ego element to this. And I agree to that 100%. But there is a truth that what they're interested in is the ability to push forward, which is what a leader is, and voice this content. And that means that what you're talking about is not just planned, but like it's known what you would do. It's known you're the type of personality, you're the type of mind. They probably have quantum tech that read your body and you read your whole thing and said, oh, hey, if we give him that, he's going to do that and then this. Okay, let's do that. And all they're doing, right? It's just so subtle. And what happens is that you're driven, you're caught. It's like you were fishing and all of a sudden you caught something and you're like, oh, and now you're compelled. And they're like, great, he's going to help out. And I see this happening everywhere. The Experiencer Reddit is run by someone like this. All the podcasts are run by people like who themselves have experiences. And what's even crazier, sometimes some of these people were talking, Preston Dennett and Linda Moulton Howe, then they get experiences because they're talking. This is what the aliens love, is that we're transforming the world this way. And so I just love your story, Yannick. I really think that's amazing. And it just corroborates and connects the bigger picture that this is all very important to them and to I think it's important to all of us. So, yeah.
In your book, you talk about one of the things that the Greys want to build on the planet is what you call an enlightened city.
Yeah. The city. So I use the word enlightened because that's our frame of reference, that we have to be on that level. The thing that the yogis, the gurus and the yogis would call enlightenment is the level we have to be on to just even begin interacting and engaging with these entities. Not that they said that to me, but I deduced that, and I know that to be factual. And I think all the evidence supports that to be the case. The city element. So yeah, this is the kind of more challenging aspect of the story, because I'm pretty certain there's going to be a planet event. We all seem to have it. We all seem to have some kind of like apocalyptic planet event type stuff. And they just basically described to me that after that planet event is when the seeds get put down, the seeds being the hybrids. And then so that's the 24th contact event. She tells me that. And then in the 25th, she says the hybrids there'll be a city. And she shows me the city in kind of this projection, and the hybrids are walking in the city. And the hybrids, it's a really interesting mix. They look like humans in the sense that they're wearing pants and t-shirts. So they're not looking like gray aliens all futuristic with their jumpsuits. They're wearing pants and t-shirts like they're trying to be human. And there was a really interesting, weird feeling that seems to almost be connected here from some of the research, like John Ramirez or some of these people coming out now. They didn't feel like aliens, actually. They felt like humans, but just kind of like new humans, like a development has occurred, a twist or a little change has happened, but they're still people. And that there actually wasn't anything scary about it. And that this is where the hybrids will be. The hybrids will be on a city here on Earth. And there's kind of this impression that something big, like the planet event, might shake things up so much that they take advantage of that discordance and put themselves down here. And it's hard to talk about because I think the human mind has a tendency to think, oh, that's takeover, or that's evil, or that's military, or that's aggressive. And but I don't take it that way at all. And the reality is, a lot of people approach me not that. A lot of people, apparently, people have been talking these ways for decades now. That's why I was terrified when I first started talking about this way, and everyone's like, no, I've heard this before. So I was like, oh, but I don't like talking about it too much. But I'm pretty certain planet events is part of it. And then the city itself is now I'm left with the stuff about the future. I can't know, right? I can't know. I'm not prophesizing. I'm feeling like there's a lot of that corroborative evidence that this is where it's going. I'm there'll be a video released soon that seems that my YouTube channel that really seems to put all this together. That this is where it all seems to be going. But I don't. Sorry. Yeah, I'm pretty certain it's going to be so big that it holds kind of a planetary population. So it's some instead of having everyone spread out over North America, everyone's condensed living in a highly dimensional city. So things like white rooms and past lives and going into other dimensional realms are all available for people driving their crafts. And I think the most important part that they really are against is our human destruction of the planet. And I think that they really want to help us stop doing that. And that's what I really feel a lot of this is all about. That imagine you can be put into a city where you're given tech and you have to be on this higher dimensional level to operate the tech. And then once you have it, hey, you can go anywhere. You're not involved. You're not damaging the environment when you do it. So you could go in a faith craft and go be at the coral reefs in Australia, and you're not affecting anything. And you can watch fish and watch the sharks. You can go to the Marina Trench, or you can go into a volcano, which we've seen crafts. Apparently, there are some films of crafts going into volcanoes. And you could explore, you could do things like that. You could be in the outer edges of space. You have kind of a lot more freedoms when you're in these higher dimensions, and then you could get your human desire for curiosity, or even the fascination of watching the sunset on another planet, right? You can get like kind of fascinating like, freedoms that might come that I think come with all of this, and so far seem to be a part of their reality. And yeah, that's the picture I paint from all the information and everything I gleaned from them. But again, it's hard to kind of I don't put it in the book as like I know this to be true, and I just don't talk that way. So I do my best to say this is what I'm given. You have to make up your own mind about it. It seems to me a lot of evidence seems to be pointing this way, and but yeah, that's the gist of it. You know,
You sent me an image of a being called the leader.
yeah. Yeah, the leader I consider to be this archetypal mantis entity. Um, I'm not quite clear that I actually think the mantis originate from a an insect type species hood. I'm actually convinced they are so dimensional. They're using these bodies, and they might be changing up their shapes and styles depending on who they're interacting with. Um, that I think that because my leader reminded me of an aardvark, still having the kind of like hands like this. And though I think that they're choosing mantis type insects because I literally like I sometimes feel like they're sitting there staring at a catalog of like earth animals. And they're like, oh, I love that one. I'll be that one this life and or for this manifestation. And so they're choosing mantis because I've also heard them be spiders, and I don't see too much of that. Preston Denning had some weird ones where the mantis type thing, the guy running the program was a spider, and so that's just a really weird thing to be. And why is it replicating human animals so or planetary animals so much? Unless you were possibly the over architect of the entire system of planet Earth, that these are all just the fact. Oh, I love that animal that we created, 20 billion years ago or 20 million years ago. And they're like, that's my favorite animal on that planet. And then they will choose to be that. I don't know. But he's the architect. And I actually get more information about him as a child than I do throughout the contact events, calling themselves from an era long ago. So that's just a really interesting way to frame themselves. And yeah, and I basically get told he's the architect of the entire thing. So all of it is him, right? I get turned into the orb, into the white room. I see the afterlife. It's a whole experiment to help me discover my soul. Well, all of that was his design, not the elders, not the gray alien I deal with, his design. And I'll learn that. And that is just absolutely profound. It's very profound to have a reorientation of that, to learn that. And but in the end, they were kind of fatherly. Like he's I'm convinced that compassion, is in love, and are all like human fragmentations, emotional fragmentations of higher dimensional experiences. Like when we feel love from, like, we might feel unity and kind of God consciousness, and then we want to be compassionate to people. And that's our way of fragmenting that reality. But these guys are like that God field and then amplified on some other, like, as if it's there, you're in that God field. Now we're going to go further. And these guys live there. They live in this kind of like higher echelons that are hard to comprehend and might bend time in weird ways. And I'm actually convinced the possibility of living outside of it, and then masters and having whole dimensional spaces outside of time. And so they're architects in these grand way. I'm certain that the whole thing is theirs. I think the planet might be theirs. Solar, like, and I call them in the workbook the gurus of the galaxy, because it's just so overarching, as if Earth and all the souls and the soul reincarnation process is all something they're very aware of. And then this is we involve ourselves to the degree, but we let nature play out its thing here too. And I think that's what I think that thing is. It is a yeah. I think that the human race is going to have trouble articulating what that thing is, and I don't even know that when we even get disclosure, we learn fully what that thing is. I think we might be told something like, "Oh yeah, it's outside of time," but we don't know what that means when we hear those words, right? We're just using constructs on our brains to understand it. So, yeah, it's the higher controller of the whole entire thing.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, epic.
I'd like to show everyone your book or books, let's say.
Sure.
Yeah, so this is the Jeff's book, the Rising. It's fairly
Right.
thick and it's very well written for those interested in purchasing it. And it's very easy to follow too. Everything's planned out. You and Susie did an amazing job.
Yeah,
And
Susie,
could you
I can
talk
give
about
Susie that credit.
briefly the second one? We didn't get into that, the Rising the Workbook. What's it
Yeah.
about?
So, um, fundamentally, at the end of my book, the Rising, I'm given um, I'm given some insight and then a command. So I'm given insight into what's going to happen. And actually, in telepathy, since the memories came out, I also was given more information. And I am 100% convinced, 100% convinced. Disclosure, a part of disclosure is, if it's the government, if it's some Pentagon guy, this will be funny, is saying humans have to become more spiritual. And it's a pair up. It's a kind of a worldwide, like, sorry, everybody, you have to become more spiritual. And the aliens have been saying this since day one, since Betty and Dreesen, and like all these 80s and 90s contact events actually have entities talking about human spirituality in the contact events that most people brush over, but it's pretty significant. And I know we need spirituality to understand them, and this is what that means to me. And I think that they giving me what they gave me, the right room, the Rising, the learning to embody the Rising, then a Vedic guru, and understanding all the kind of echelons of what I experienced with Vedic philosophy. This is my role to help with that, what I know is coming, which is a worldwide call for spirituality. And for me, I think that there are some facts. I think that the unified field force is real. It's alive. The human mind, because we're coming out of this, the science was anti-religious, and that's where science is born out of the age of enlightenment as a rebellion against religion. And so it actually holds itself tight to a I think, therefore I am brain construct. I'm a thing of my brain, and my brain has impulses, and I desire to do that, and that's why I do what I do. But it's not what we are. It's I am, therefore I think. And we are a being state. We're an energy form first. And we resist so much the basics of the spirituality, that possibly the universe is alive, and awareness is actually real. Its awareness is infiltrating all aspects of our existence, through all mountains and all atoms. It's all awareness is infiltrating it, and then our awareness is an offshoot of that awareness. So that is the God force, meaning it's not mechanical; it's alive. And that's and here's the other twist. I've never met a more powerful person than my guru. And I can't talk about my guru publicly too much, but right, because there's a privacy thing there that I have to respect. But there's a lot of people online. There's a lot of people that talk, and no one has displayed any of the powers that I've seen my guru have, and that means that they're doing it right. And those guys don't see it mechanically. Those guys see it all as alive. And then when you see God as the real thing that you can interact with, or the quantum field that's aware of itself as alive, then all the powers open up naturally. All the things that everyone's trying to get, they all want those things. They all want to have remote viewing. They want to have astral projection. They want to have astral projection and not be confused by the images in their own mind. They want telepathy. They want all these things, yet they are. It's almost like your people are going in blind. And I'd say, and I'm yelling, actually, God is the way. And because we're rebelling against God from the past, we get it all confused. And that's my whole argument, is that go back to God. And my workbook is a way to help with that. It's to say, it's to remove all the moral stuff, all the moral junk, and to make it a personal, practical experience, and to find ways to embody it by visioning, and then your powers come out through this grounding of the heart. So I have a whole philosophy in kind of science, which is backed by Vedic philosophy, and I use actual science where I can to amplify these things. But the bottom line is, I'm not telling you, I'm not yelling at you, I'm not trying to teach at you. I'm trying to get you to have the experience yourself. So that's what the workbook is actually about, which is what I learned from corporate training and kind of getting into adult education. So I want to make people. I don't want the conversation to be about me. I had to make it about me to talk about the rising, what happened to me, but I really want the conversation to be about other people. I want to hear about what other people are having, the effects they're having from meditation, or from their own psychic awareness or their own visioning ability. That's where I get the most joy from, is hearing a lot of people kind of develop. So that was all made sense to me to make this. And it came out of fundamentally the 24th and 25th contact event. The 25th contact event, I was told to actually teach spirituality, teach what I learned from them. And so that's where that helps. This book helps me keep that, go in that direction and amplify that responsibility I have. So.
Wow. Well said. Well said.
Yeah. Thank you.
We've got like at least 15 other contact events that we're going to have to get into another time, but
Yeah.
you've been through a lot. An amazing adventure really so far. Now, would you have a closing statement before we finish off the interview?
Yeah. Yeah, you are God. That's the bottom line here. And I think the human mind has a lot of resistance to that. Ross Coulthart has a really good line: cognitive dissonance. The people talking in the UFO field are very scientific and physicists. That's great, but it's only going to answer. That doesn't answer you having that. You got that message, and then you start talking publicly about it. That physicist can't define or help with that interaction you had, but a consciousness orientation does. And in the end of it, it's because you're a powerful entity. You have all the power in the universe residing in you, and the human mind is kind of the obstruct that prevents us from that. And in the end of the day, it's because you're God. We are all God, and yeah, that's where I think all this moves to. So,
yeah. Well, Jeff, thanks for coming on. You're an amazing speaker, very knowledgeable. I've had loads of fun today, and it was highly educational. So thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks so much.
And to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.